Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. Why should you care about the future of English football? Well, Matt Slater has been speaking to the chair of the Independent Football Regulator, David Kogan. He clarifies exactly what a regulator will do. He also speaks about his relationships with politics and politicians, and more importantly, why English football needs a regulator. Take a listen to this, leave us a comment and let us know what you think.
Well, David, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to Athletic HQ. David Kogan, the new chair of the Independent Football Regulator. I would normally spend a few minutes fluffing you up and explaining who you are.
Oh, keep fluffing. I love it.
Yeah. We're not going to do that because we have so much to get through. Whenever I write about the regulator, dozens of questions, lots of confusion about what you can, can't do, what people want you to do, etc., etc. This is your opportunity to, slay some dragons, manage some expectations. We're going to do all of that, I promise. But I have to start with last week's, we're speaking on Thursday, last week's furore around, most recent furore around your appointment. And This was about the criticism Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy got for the appointment process. Would you acknowledge that this has not been the best start? Could you have done without that?
Well, okay, let me just start off by saying about being on this podcast. I know The Athletic well, great admirer of the work that you put out, but more than that, this is part of a process of transparency that I'm absolutely committed to from within the regulator. And you and other journalists who want to interview me, we've been entirely open to those interviews and will continue to be so. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to answer questions, and I'm happy to come back in 6 months or a year from now, where you can check my answers today and see how much they stand up to what we actually do. Because I think this is all about being accountable and standing up. Now, when it comes to the experience of the last week or two, and I say this as a non-politician, it's been a very odd experience being in the eye of the political storm as I have been. And, I am going to go back on what actually happened here. I was approached in May 24 by the Conservatives as to whether I want to do this job. I hadn't applied for it. They approached me. The general election gets called. Labour comes in. They approach me again to apply for this job. And by that point, I duly do so. And I then asked to go through a full appointments process. So I was put through an interview. I have, for 7 years, since I was first appointed by the Conservative government to the board of Channel 4, made it absolutely clear to everyone who asked that I had been the author of 2 books on the Labour Party, chairman of Labour List, which is a Labour Party website, and a Labour Party donor. And I have made it crystal clear in every interview and everything I've always done. So everybody knew, the Conservatives knew and Labour knew, okay? When the Shawcross Commission got started, which was just about 6 months ago, after I'd done the Select Committee, and in the Select Committee, I was asked the question, who had I given money to? And I had never ever been asked that question before. Civil Service hadn't asked me the question. I'd have been happy to tell them, but because I declared I was a Labour donor, I thought that was sufficient. And I said at the Select Committee I had given small sums of money to both Keir Starmer and to Lisa Nandy in their leadership election campaigns in 2020. These were matters of $3,000 each. Okay, $3,000 each.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't declared it because I hadn't declared any of the political donations I made. It wasn't up to me to declare them. It was actually up to the politicians themselves. This produced the Shawcross Commission. And in the Shawcross Commission, which was published 2 weeks ago, he says this. This is his report. The Commissioner accepts that Mr. Kogan was not aware of the deviation from best practice. That deviation from best practice was I didn't answer a question I wasn't asked about who I'd given money to. I was never asked the question. So therefore, believe it or not, I didn't answer it. So he accepts Mr. Kogan was not aware of the deviation from best practice and that the Culture, Media and Sport Committee, among others, have endorsed his suitability for the role. This inquiry makes no finding about Mr. Kogan's suitability for the role of the chair of IFR. Or in other words, the Select Committee, over a dozen members of the House of Lords, including Karen Brady of West Ham, a Conservative peer, including the leader of the House of Lords from the Conservative Party on this bill, all endorsed me. No one in football has challenged my ability to do this job. I'm well known in the world of football, and what I'm doing now is focusing on the job. So to come to your question, clearly it's pretty bizarre, actually, to find my name being mentioned in the House of Commons and my picture being on television news. And I have to say, never happened to me before, and I hope it doesn't happen to me again. I have no part in the process within DCMS. I don't know what their processes were or whether they were right or wrong. Shawcross draws some conclusions there. And therefore, the bit that I was responsible for, I accept that I should possibly have announced what those donations were, even though I was never asked. But it didn't cross my mind. Beyond that, do I think it throws a shadow over what we're doing? I hope in this podcast, and I tell you what we're doing, your listeners will understand that we are really committed now to doing the job, and we've been doing it. And now we're talking about what we're doing, and that's the really important thing, and that's what I'm here to do.
You acknowledged, I think, in your answer there, possibly you could have said something. And there is I have read the report, I promise you.
Good.
18-page report, decent stuff, and you are personally completely exonerated.
I am.
There are no questions for David Kogan in that report.
None.
There is, however, an interesting line where in your entirely independent interview with the selection panel, you were asked at the end, it's the standard interview question, David, is there anything else that maybe we should know that might embarrass the government? And you are not just some bloke off the streets.
Yeah.
You are a political animal.
Yeah.
Would you not acknowledge that perhaps you should have thought, do you know what? There is maybe something I should mention.
You know, Matt, the truth is this, right? Over the last 6 years, I have given, I think they say this in the report, I've given 33,000 quid. Right? That's the figure they collect, right? I met Lisa Nandy once in 2020. Literally. It's the only time I'd ever met her. And she had to recuse herself from this process. So I've not really met her in the last 6 months. Okay. So I had no pre-existing relationship. The whole basis of Shawcross's report is that we had some sort of pre-existing relationship, that I had paid money to her and Starmer. And that's what led me to getting this job. I didn't apply for this job because I thought that actually I had other things to do. But the truth is, everyone acknowledges I got this job because I'm qualified to do it. No one's disputed that. And I, in all honesty, in doing interviews like this and in doing interviews with the civil service, if they ask me a question, I give them probably over long, boring answers. I would have happily have given them a full list, as I did after the select committee when I was asked to, of who I'd given money to. Because they didn't ask, I thought by merely saying I was a Labour donor, that was kind of enough.
Yeah.
You could argue it's a good thing or a bad thing. But I thought that was enough detail. No one ever asked me for any further detail. So should I have guessed that they might have asked me that question and I might have preempted it, which is the kind of view of Shawcross? I suppose, I mean, maybe, but I actually don't think anyone would have thought that, including me. It didn't cross my mind.
Okay.
And I'm prepared to admit that that might have been naivety, but equally, you know, I will go back over the record for the previous 12 months of that interview. Everyone knew I was a Labour donor, and they all admit they knew.
But do you understand why the bigger topic is important to do with this whole, it's the clues in the name, in your title, Independent Football Regulator.
Let's try
so
and deal with that.
Let's just address this question of, I'm not a government crony, I'm not a government appointment, FIFA's not upset, I am independent.
Okay, good. So there are like 3 bits of independence that people have raised. Let's just go through them. One is, when I first was appointed, was I too close to the Premier League, having been responsible for 5 Premier League domestic rights deals? Or was I too close to the EFL, which was the accusation from the Premier League? No one's accused me of being too close to the National League, though actually they now think I probably might be. And the truth is, it's nonsense. Because I'd worked for the Premier League, because I'd worked for the Football League, as it then was called, EFL, because I'd worked for UEFA and the Scottish Premier League and the NFL and Six Nations and Premier Rugby, my independence in the world of sport was known to everybody and still remains so. And indeed, the work we're actually doing now is demonstrating that independence. I think if you go and talk to any of the leagues now and ask them directly, they'll tell you I'm completely independent of any influence from them. So then you get into independence from politicians. Nobody who has known me in my professional career for 45 years will tell you that I'm anything but hugely, possibly too independent. I'm independent in terms of my views on things, and in practice, no politician is going to influence me in the way I do this job. It doesn't matter what political party they are. As it happens, we, on the November the 1st, and this kind of hasn't covered, but we became a legally independent body from DCMS. Okay? I think most people at DCMS will tell you that in the last 6 months, my driving our objectives, let me put it politely, within DCMS has not been necessarily the thing they found particularly comfortable. I think they're as relieved as I am that we are now independent. And actually, ministers, no politician, apart from debating the process, which has come from the Conservative Party, no politician has tried to meddle in anything we do, and nor will they. Where we will get into the interesting times ahead will be when we start really doing stuff and using our powers about clubs. And of course, it will actually probably be politicians in local constituencies who've got clubs in those constituencies who will have most engagement with, because it directly affects them. That's a good thing. We want to have direct relationships with politicians of all stripes and colours, because actually what we're dealing with here is the communities in which football sits. That's our remit. So I'm very happy to work with politicians of all colours. As it happens, we've approached the Conservatives 3 times in the last month. I've asked them for private meetings. They've never responded. I've approached the Lib Dems for private meetings. They've never responded. These are all in the House of Commons. House of Lords, I met politicians, all parties. So I absolutely stand by my level of independence, and I'm happy to come back here in a year and you can test to see if I was telling you the truth.
I'm just going to jump in here because I know there'll be people listening going, oh, hands up in the air, I've got a question to ask.
Yeah, go on.
And it'll be great. I think we've established your independence from politicians.
Right.
But you've already talked about the relationship that you must have with politics.
Sure.
Is that not, I know it's going to be too simplistic, but people are going to be saying, whoa, I thought football hates that. I thought FIFA and UEFA hates that.
Well, wait a bit. FIFA and UEFA will come on to it, but let me give you an example, a concrete, real example. If you talk to Clive Betts or Labour Party or indeed other politicians around Sheffield Wednesday and ask them, and look at what Clive Betts has said in the House of Commons about me personally in the last few weeks, they will tell you that the work we have been doing behind the scenes before we got our powers with the EFL, with the HMRC, with politicians has been nothing but proactive in trying to find a solution to save an incredibly important football club. Now, you can't do that without dealing with the local politicians because these things are all intermixed. But I don't care whether a politician is a Labour politician, a Tory politician, a Lib Dem. It doesn't matter from the regulator's point of view what political party they are. What it matters is their local community and trying to save their local clubs if their clubs are in trouble. That's the remit. As far as UEFA and FIFA are concerned, I haven't had a single conversation with UEFA and FIFA. As it happens, I used to do work with UEFA. I know people at UEFA, but I haven't reached out to them. They're not reaching out to me. The FA is the body in this country that deals with UEFA and FIFA. We have no remit to do so, and we have no remit to have an interaction with them. If they wish to have it, I'm very happy to have it. But actually, our focus, as outlined by the legislation and as outlined by what we're doing, is about the English domestic game, and that's what we're spending our time on.
Before we get into that, and we are going to get into that, let's go back right to the beginning of this, the fundamentals. You know, I see it in my comments to pieces. I heard it in the House of Lords. I heard it in the House of Commons. Why? What are we doing here? English football's a massive success story. We haven't got that many. It's a global success story. What are we doing here? I also thought the Labour government was kind of steering back from regulation at the moment, trying to sort of free us all. What are we doing here?
Well, I mean, what the Labour government's motivation is, you can ask them. But I can tell you what my motivation is. So I spent, since 1999, I have worked in football about furthering the football's commercial objectives. I'm responsible for billions of pounds of revenue flow into English football. Billions of pounds, right? So, of course, I'm absolutely committed to a growth strategy, not just for the Premier League, but also for the EFL and the National League. But nobody can pretend that despite the great successes of English football and raising money and the rest of it, the pyramid, and this isn't just about the Premier League, it's about 116 clubs, the pyramid faces extreme challenges. And we can see this not only from clubs that have gone bust or have had bad owners. What actually the biggest problem is that in football, there's never been an early warning system as when clubs are going to get into trouble. One of the key parts of our remit is we're going to have a licensing regime and a financial regulation regime where we will know by working with every one of those individual clubs what their business plans are, what their owners' commitment are to them and the rest of it. And we will have amber lights flashing that will tell us long before the EFL and the Premier League whether clubs are getting into problems. And then we can work with those clubs to get to the point of financial stability. Our remit is about the stability of the pyramid and the stability of individual clubs. It's not about competition issues. It's not about who wins a championship or doesn't win a championship. And I don't really think that anybody who takes any time at all looking at the pyramid can say that most of it is ridden by debt debt's not necessarily a bad thing, but the problem with debt is if debt gets into trouble, if owners who've got debt, and this was the example at Sheffield Wednesday, Chancery in 2015 started off by putting lots of money into the club. But the early warning systems that Will build in will tell us when he stops doing that. And the moment he stopped doing that, the club pitches into total chaos. That's why you need financial regulation and why you need licensing. It's about knowledge. And as I keep saying to people, I'm not worried actually about bad owners, because I think we'll find out about bad owners very early and we can work on that. My worry is good owners. My worry is owners in League One and League Two who are putting their own money in, who are losing money year after year after year, and at some point, decide they can't put any more money in. And then the fans of those clubs run into trouble. And I say this, I know, because you're a Southend United fan. How many HMRC investigations were there into Southend United? 18.
Yeah.
Are you telling me
18.
Are you telling me that if we'd existed, I don't know when this started, 10 years ago, if we'd existed 10 years ago, the regulator is Southend United wouldn't have been given some degree of protection by a regulator being involved? Of course you would. So, you're the prime example of a club that actually got saved, but it almost got saved not by luck, but by a new owner coming through and you having to go through the crisis of nearly going bust on numerous occasions. How is that good for that club or that community?
Well, I can answer that one. It's not. I think the question that I still have is, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Yes, great to be armed with this knowledge, but what would you have done if we just stick to Southend, or it could be Morecambe or Wigan or Derby? What would you have done sooner?
So I'm going to answer that question by talking about what we're doing now about regulation, and then I'll come around to the specific answer. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because unless you understand what we're doing, you don't get the full context. Right. So in the last 2 months, we have issued 5 public consultations on our powers. Excuse me. The first one was at the end of August, and it was about existing owners, obviously with a view to Sheffield Wednesday. In fact, I think it was the day we issued that Morecambe got saved.
Yeah.
But, it could have been Morecambe. And it could be others.
Yeah.
100%. So Sheffield Wednesday. And that allows us to mount, if we have enough evidence, and normally from the leagues, but it could also be from fans, it could be from any number of groups, it could be from the PFA. If we have enough evidence that the club is getting into trouble, we can mount an immediate investigation into how that club is operating. We have the powers to go in and get all the financial information that possibly Mr. Chancery wasn't himself volunteering, because we have legal powers to do so, which others don't have.
Okay.
We also have relationships with, the Serious Crime Agency, and with Interpol. I mean, we have extremely wide powers of information gathering that the leagues don't have. So one, you get the data. Is the club really in trouble? Secondly, we can put a team in to that club to investigate with the owner and with the club exactly what's going wrong. And we can tell the owner or ask the owner to take immediate action. And ultimately, if they don't do so, we have the power to remove the owner from the club.
So this is the key bit.
We will work extremely hard not to use, because we're going to spend as much time as we need to getting under the bonnet of the car of the club to find out what's going wrong. And of course, at the moment, the EFL and the Premier League can't really have that level of investigation.
Indeed. They've come a long way. They've got better, but they're still limited. You are now going to bust through those limitations.
Well, that's our role.
Exactly. I'm going to go nuclear, because people are saying, this is all great. This is great that we're going to learn these crises sooner and earlier, and maybe we can do something about it. But let's just say if the person isn't reasonable, and we've had, I don't want to list them, but there are plenty of unreasonable people. There are people that didn't know what they were doing. They've got out of control, whatever. What are you going to do? You say that you have the power to go in and intervene and take this asset from them? So can you put them into administration?
Yes.
Is the regulator itself going to run the club for a short amount of time for a sale?
No, we will never run a club, but we could certainly put administrators into the club and to find new buyers.
And fund the club?
Well, no, I mean, the regulator
presumably
itself,
this club will be lost.
The regulator itself is not going to fund a club, but what we can do, and indeed you're seeing this indeed in the case of Sheffield Wednesday, where the administrators put in essentially that was triggered by the HMRC. I think you can assume we had pretty close conversations with the HMRC and the EFL. We were working extremely closely with them, but the administrator is raising money within the club and is now using that money to fund the club, to pay the players, by the way, for the first time in, 6 months, and is now inviting, and I'm told is getting potential offers for the club. Now, the point about this, which I think people have forgotten, is the nature of the threat. If you're an owner of a club and you think you can hold out, and this was the case with Chancery, but I mean, actually, any number of them, you think, hey, I've got this. There are two ways I can make money. I'm a bad owner. I can flog off the stadium. We have the power to prevent that. If you read the legislation, this is the difference between us and the EFL and the Premier League. We absolutely have the power. In fact, we have, almost the duty to ensure that fans can come to us and stop us and allow us to stop owners selling off the key asset of the club, which is the stadium. That's a huge, huge change. So that's one. And because, owners buy clubs, flog off the stadium, turn it into a shopping centre, and that's where they make the money. So one, we can prevent that avenue of them making money and exploiting the club. And the second thing is that actually the threat of us coming in and saying, we've mounted an investigation, we don't believe that you are paying your bills, we don't believe that you are managing this club in the way that's appropriate to being an owner of the club and the community asset, we're now going to remove you. You have 1 month to either sell the club, because if we come in and remove you, you gain no money at all.
Okay.
So our threat is, and this is the point with Chancery, Chancery kept getting offers of 30 or 40 million quid, we're told. We don't know if it's true. Wanted 100 million. Well, he's ended up putting it into administration and getting...
We shall see.
We shall see.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is owners believing that the EFL in particular, but also the Premier League hasn't really been affected by this yet, has no ability to take effective sanctions. We have the absolute ability to do that. And that is a huge shift.
Yeah. I think you said earlier that you're not worried about bad owners. And I understand the point.
I mean, we'll know who they are and we can act on them.
I understand the point you're making, that people go in with great intentions, they have amazing CVs and things go wrong, right? Their circumstances change. I totally acknowledge that. And there have been lots of examples. One thing I think that fans, again, this is about this managing expectations. They know that you're taking on the OADT process, what used to be called the fit and proper person test.
Ours, of course, goes beyond owners. It's directors and senior executives.
Indeed.
So it's all the way through the structure of the club.
Are you going to do it better? Do you think you will catch more, I don't know, unqualified, under-resourced people going in? So we will hopefully avoid some of these.
Yes. Because if you are trying to buy a football club, I mean, and this is, just coming up, I didn't really get the chance to talk about the other consultations we've done. So the four after the first one we did were fan engagement, which we could talk about, licensing, internal corporate governance, and financial regulation. These cover pretty much everything that a club does. But the one in which, will kick in early next year is about new owners buying clubs. And not just new owners, the people they're putting in who are going to run the clubs, the directors, the senior execs. Why? Because you're getting more and more overseas owners who themselves aren't directly coming in and managing the club. They're not there. It's the people they're putting in, all of whom are subject now to our tests. And if you read, and by the way, listeners, this is on our website, it's all open, it's public. Read what we're saying about that. Those are tests that people have to really, really pass before they can become a senior exec at a football club and take decisions about a football club that affect the local communities. That's our remit. So we can't cock that up, I believe is the technical term.
Yeah.
And therefore, what we have to be is geared up with our technical systems and with our staffing. And I'd like to talk a bit about that in a second, if you'll let me. One of the things we're going to do is have every single club, 116, will have one individual within our staff responsible for that club. So if you are a club where we're getting information you're in trouble, there is one of our staff will be vested with a lot of knowledge about it. But we're also going to say to clubs that are in, say, the National League or League Two, who, when we're asking them for financial information, can't give it to us because they simply haven't got the people to do it, we're going to put people into the clubs to help them do it.
Okay, let's talk about what you've been up to. Because first time we met was at the Culture Media Select Committee.
In the corridor.
Pacing up and down outside. You were looking at the paintings. I was looking at you. And I think you did 2 hours, was it? It felt like...
it felt like 10, but it was probably 2.
It was a good old session. We're not going to do 2 hours, listeners.
Okay.
What have you been doing since then? I mean, there's bits that there's been milestones. You mentioned one, that you're now legally independent from DCMS. You've been hiring people. But by all means, tell me about who these people are. And you've also been meeting clubs. I know there was a big meeting, was it a month ago in Manchester?
Manchester, the biggest ever gathering in English football in its history. 110 football clubs. Never happened before.
And how did it go?
It was great. Actually, it was great. I mean, let me talk about Manchester in a second. So there were really 3 things I felt we had to do when I took on this job 6 months ago. First was make the regulator itself fit for purpose. So what had happened before, I think what had happened was, frankly, politicians, DCMS, that's the government department, doing the legislation, had thought about the legislation in detail, but nobody had really been thinking about how the hell any of it was going to be implemented. And as you know better than anybody, in football, nothing is static. Everything changes all the time. So I came in, and my concern was that none of the staff really had worked at the regulator, or only 1 or 2 had ever really met a football club, which, if you think about it, is weird. And I was fairly insistent, I'm being polite about this now, but I was extremely insistent that every single member of staff at the regulator had to go and meet at least 3 football clubs. To date, 2.5 months later, there have been over 100 meetings between the staff of the regulator and all 116 clubs up and down the system. We're doing half a dozen of these meetings almost a day at the moment. I mean, and we are engaging. I personally have met every Premier League club. I've met all 72 EFL clubs, and I've met quite a few National League clubs. I've met them all, as well as the leagues themselves. And
just so our listeners understand, when you say you've met the club, are you meeting them? The chief execs, CFOs?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the senior execs who want to put themselves forward. Different clubs put different people forward. Some are owners, some are CEOs. But my teams are meeting everybody involved in the engagement of stuff that we need to care about, including, by the way, fans groups. Okay, so we've had massively extensive meetings with supporters groups across all the clubs. So now, and that culminated in this thing in Manchester. So we're getting fit for purpose. We've got at the select committee, as you know, I was asked about my lack of financial regulation. I've now got a CEO, Richard Monks, who comes down to have a background in financial regulation. We've appointed 2 members of our board. There will be ultimately 7 non-execs. And we've just advertised, actually, for the other 5. And 2 of them come from a background of both regulation and also, in the case of one of them, comes back from a background of law and very much involved in football. So we've got football knowledge on the board. We are creating advisory committees drawn from people on football as well. So the regulator itself is becoming geared and fit for purpose. And we're probably, we've probably hired 2/3 of the headcount we're going to have. My own view about headcount, just so everybody knows, is we want a smaller staff that's better qualified in Manchester and London to do the job rather than a very large staff that's just going to be spreading itself. We want really smart, committed people.
This feels like a good moment to ask about cost.
Yeah.
That has come up.
Sure.
How much is this going to cost?
Not going to comment on it. I've seen all sorts of mad numbers. When we finally get to the world of football, talk about the levy, because all our costs will be charged back to football. They're not from the public purse. Then those numbers will be revealed. But I'm not going to talk about our budgets at the moment because we're still evolving them. So that's the first bit, fit for purpose. Second bit, engaging with football. And I've just really talked about this. We are currently having not only those meetings at a kind of club level, we're now engaged with all the leagues at what is known as the State of the Game report process. And we can talk about that a bit in a minute if you want. And the third bit was the regulation itself, which are these 5 public consultations. And next year we'll be doing some more on financial regulation. We will start licensing the clubs. All 116 clubs will go through a provisional licensing process, and we will make sure they all pass. But we'll make sure they all pass. And then, frankly, in the case of big clubs, they won't have any problems because the stuff we're asking for is a normal kind of audit process. And smaller clubs who haven't got the people to do it, as I said, we will put our people in to help them do it. So I'm absolutely confident that, in a year from now, we will have got 116 clubs under provisional licenses. That will allow us then to look at the levy, and we will be in the State of Game report will be published. And as I say, we can talk about that. And you will be able to judge me on our output.
Let's talk about it now, because it feels to me like it's the most important thing that you guys. It's certainly the things you've got to do right straight away. The clue's a little bit in the title here as well. The state of the game. I mean, what do you want to look at? What can we expect from it? How are you going to do it?
Okay. So the State of the Game report is a very interesting thing in the history of all this. Because some people in the world of football have regarded it as far and away the most important thing we're doing. They think that somehow we're going to come in and we're going to write a report which is going to say essentially everything in football is disastrous and we're there to blow it all up and rebuild it. That's one view. Another view is the same report, the game report is exactly what it says on the tin, which is we are going to write for mid to late 2026 the most detailed report ever written on English football, because not only do we have all the information about individual clubs and their state of readiness and their stability and their financial stability, but also about the game in general. So to give you an example, and that will include a very high level of risk assessment about where the game sits. And let me give you an obvious example. An example that's very close to my heart. What funds English football? The overwhelming thing that funds English football are the media rights revenues that come in to the Premier League and to the EFL. 2/3 of those revenues come from one company, which is Comcast in America, either through Sky or through NBC. They do a fantastic job, fantastic broadcasters. But I, as somebody who used to negotiate those deals, know as well as anybody that the world is changing. And what happens if the EFL, which currently gets, I think it's 985 million, nearly $1 billion, what happens if that drops by 10% or 20% in 3 years' time?
As we've seen elsewhere in Europe.
Well, I'm old enough and experienced enough to have been through the ITV digital collapse in, I think it was 2002, where basically all the broadcast contracts to the 72 clubs stopped.
Yeah.
Now, having lived through that experience, my sense of risk is we have to say, what happens if? That is what you're looking for us to do. And if that were to happen in 3 years or 4 years' time, what can we do now that starts addressing that potential risk? So the State of the Game report is not just a statement of where we are today, it's a statement of what are the structures of football and how they're operating, what are the risks that are facing them, and where do we go from there? And the last bit of it, which you haven't asked me about, but you're bound to ask me about, is what then happens about any distribution agreement within the world of football. But are
you reading my notes?
No, I just, everybody does. So we can talk about that as you want to. But the point is, we're able to take, for the course of the next few months, we are now engaging very directly with the Premier League, with the EFL, and we will do with the FA and the national game. And we're having all those meetings set up as we speak. Very detailed discussions about their view of the state of the game. And they have very wildly different views. And also, we're beginning to talk to them about their view of why there wasn't a deal done in 23 and 25. The one thing I would say, before you want to push me on that, is the world of football is different to when I worked in it, actually. The thing that's been interesting is that when I worked mainly with Richard Scudamore at the Premier League and Brian Mulwiney and then Greg Clarke at the EFL, the relationship between the EFL and the Premier League was a very close one. Richard Scudamore and Brian Mulwiney famously, and I think it was 2007, 2008, did a deal which essentially led to solidarity payments being paid, right? There was Richard Scudamore, of course, had been a chief executive of the Football League. Richard Masters, of course, used to be a commercial director. In fact, I knew Richard first when he was commercial director at the Football League. And of course, Rick Parry used to be chief executive of Liverpool and chief executive of the Premier League. A few of us, and I, also worked for both of them. So, there has always been this traditional overlap. I find today that the atmosphere as a consequence of those failed negotiations in 23 and 25 between the two leagues is possibly less conducive to finding solutions than it might have been originally. And I hope we can help there. The second thing I'd say is the Premier League itself is quite different. When I first went there in 1999, almost all the clubs had been the creators of the league and believed in its overall mission. So though David Dean from Arsenal and Ken Bates from Chelsea, and of course they used to sit next to one another because of the alphabetical system of the Premier League at club meetings, although they did not necessarily personally love one another, that's an understatement, there was a common view about why the Premier League as an institution had to be supported, and actually very few votes ever got lost. In fact, there were very rarely many votes because
it was unanimous.
It was pretty much
nod.
And Richard Scudamore had, in that sense, a relatively straightforward time with the shareholders. Richard Masters is just facing a completely different situation, which is not his fault or the club's fault. It's just different. When you've got many, many owners who come in from overseas who weren't responsible for creating this thing, but see its success, what they want is both it to be more successful and more successful for them individually.
Indeed.
That changes the dynamic. And I think, I watched that with great interest. But that may well be why it's not been as easy as it might have been over the last few years for the two leagues to reach agreement on things that you would have expected them to do, which might have meant the regulator wouldn't have existed. In one sense, they're responsible for our creation more than government. Their failure to agree is what's triggered quite a lot of this, as well as the fan engagement issue over the European Super League.
Just for listeners, at the moment, the Premier League sends about 16% of its money down the tube.
1.6 billion over 3 years, including parachute payments.
That's the key bit, including parachute payments, which is the largest part of that big chunk, which the EFL are upset with for reasons that we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. The EFL would like 25% of the total pot. This is Rick Parry's position. He's been very clear. He's defended it also on this podcast. Dare I say that you just get around the table and say, lads, 20.5%. What are we doing here? Let's move on.
Well, I hope, listeners, you realise that Matt has just applied for a job of being a negotiator. And, something seems to me we should take him up on that. I am not going to get into any discussion about, what might or might not be the case of a negotiation between leagues. I mean, what we know is we have already got very detailed information from both leagues about what happened in 23 and what happened in 25 and why they didn't do deals then. And they have slightly differing views as to the explanation as to why. I mean, a couple of things. I think, first of all, there was a lot of kind of mythology, particularly in the Premier League, against the idea of a regulator on the basis that somehow it's going to cost the Premier League billions of pounds more than they currently pay out because the regulator was just going to come in and smash them to pieces. I don't think, actually, if you talk to clubs now or the Premier League, that is kind of the impression we're giving. The impression we're giving, which is the accurate impression, is we are gaining data. I am waiting to see the detailed arguments about parachute payments. Everybody's got a view. The thing about football is full of sacred cows. Football is all about mythology and sacred cows wandering around whatever they wander around, a pasture, a field, whatever cows walk around.
Sacred cows go wherever they like.
Sacred cows go wherever they like. And here's the thing. What nobody has really done is go back to first principles about parachute payments and indeed all the other payments that are made. And I come at this from a very straightforward position, which is everybody talks about the position between the Premier League and the relegated clubs and the Championship and the nature of parachute. Actually, football, among the 116 clubs, there are numerous precipice points. League Two down to the Championship, down to the National League.
Championship to League One.
I mean, you know something, and our responsibility is to look at all of that in the round. So any discussion about state of the game, any discussion about future financial distribution, from my point of view, is not about one issue. Actually, there are a number of really big, in fact, we don't really know how many yet, big issues. We're going to spend, and we've got the ability to do this, the next month or 2 or 3 months, whatever it takes, engaging with unilateral discussions with the leagues to get their views on what might change and how. And then we're going to bring them together. Maybe it should be in a restaurant or a pub and they can do it over drinks.
I think they tried that.
I think they actually did try that, I'm told, yeah. But we are going to get to the point where there will either be, within the world of football, and I include all 116 clubs, I don't just mean the Premier League exec and the EFL exec, I mean the 116 clubs, there will be a point at which they probably will have a choice to make as to whether there is a deal that covers off enough of the problems and it's over a long enough term basis that everybody can see actually it's giving solidity and stability to the game, or they won't do that. And if they don't do that, then we'll see if it gets into a backstop. And for your listeners who don't understand what that means, the leagues, not me, a league can enact us to then mount an external investigation and come up ultimately with a different solution as a backstop that we will be legally entitled to apply to the world of football. And I've said countless times, I have zero desire to do that.
One of the things, there's so many things that come up whenever I write or talk about regulation. One of the things that we'd like you to do, that fans with their long list of gripes on Mondays after the weekend of football, okay, if we're going to have a regulator, can he have a look at this or can she have a look at this? I think this is an opportunity for you to manage some expectations. I think I've said that already. For example, and this is not just fans, I don't need to pick on fans at all. I see MPs jumping up and talking about this, fellow writers. Are you going to have any say whatsoever over kickoff times, VAR, ticket prices. I mean, there's going to be some overlap, of course.
To all three of those. But let me, I mean, you're right. I mean, we're kind of like the sponge that now, I mean, people not understanding who we were meant they haven't been asking those questions yet. People individually, privately to me, ask them all the time, right? And no doubt, the more we're out there, and particularly now we've done the fan engagement stuff, and we're going to get the FSA, the Football Supporters Association, lots of people getting involved with this, and rightly so, with their views on what we should do. But the legislation is extremely clear about what we can and cannot do. So on one hand, I'm accused of wanting to have mission creep. I mean, will we get involved in the women's game? Will we get involved?
Because people see that as an inevitability with regulation.
There's absolutely no inevitability, and not only are we not, I have no desire to, because guess what? I've got a big enough job, and my colleagues have got a big enough job in what our remit actually is. We don't need it to be wider. We need it to be as good as we can make it. So that's the first point. We have no desire for mission creep. The second point is the expectation management here is all. I mean, the three things you mentioned, those three debating points, actually do tend to come through fans groups and indeed through MPs. And what we are doing, and I really recommend to your listeners to read what we've said on fan engagement. What we have said on fan engagement is really radical. It is different. It is in the absolute spirit of the Tracy Crouch report, which is that fans now have the right and the backing from the regulator to get far more involved in the decisions taken by clubs about things that affect them. Now, does that include VAR? It probably wouldn't, but it would certainly include things like ticket prices and the way in which the club is taking decisions.
And how will you enforce that?
We have put through democratic suggestions about democratic processes so club groups themselves become more representative, because every fan has a different view about everything, as you well know. So we need to have in every club a solid bank of fans who are democratically elected to represent the fans in general. And this exists in actually quite a lot of clubs already. And they then have the backing from the regulator to engage with the clubs about decisions that club owners or executives want to make. And if you combine that with our oversight of directors, owners, and senior executives, that gives us a pretty strong stake in this actually working properly.
In the little laundry list of gripes that fans have, I don't think I mentioned 3 p.m. kickoffs. Again, not something that you're going to have. However, you are a media rights expert.
I got the legal
I do wonder
opinion.
I do wonder if you have an opinion you're willing to share today.
Well, all I will say to you is that I know a lot about this subject because when I was negotiating the rights of the WSL, that was obviously one of the things we looked at. And we got a legal opinion on it, and it's actually extremely complicated. I think I'm right in saying that it's England, Scotland, and I think it's Montenegro.
Yes, it is. Yes,
are the only three in Europe that have still got this kind of blackout. But it's not a matter for me; it's a matter for the FA and their relationship with UEFA. And I think that. One of the things, and this isn't about 3 o'clock kickoff so much, but it is relevant, is, by the fact that Sky now transmits so many EFL games, I think it's over 1,000.
Yeah.
And of course, the Premier League now sells 280 live matches, which I think Sky's broadcasts 245 from memory. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's that number. The broadcasting slots that I used to sell to when we sold only 138 live Premier League matches, are now much, much, much more full. I mean, the broadcast calendar is much more full. And just, when you look at the issues that the PFA are raising now about how many games players are playing and the more competitions that are coming through from Europe and indeed now from FIFA at the club level, all of this is part of the general mix about how many games are being played by players, not my issue, not part of my purview, but B, where are they being broadcast and are there the broadcast slots to accommodate them? All of that is part of the general risk assessment that comes into something like the State of the Game report, but not something we can take direct action on because they're competition issues that aren't part of my purview. But clearly, they're going to be matters of interest to you and everybody else is interested in football over the next few years.
Yeah, okay. I think that was a sort of very neatly done. I'm not answering that question, but that was good. Look, just as a last final thought, we've spent so much time talking about the chair, this person you've become.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
Yeah? This sort of political punchball stroke.
I hope not.
Cure all for...
I hope not.
We haven't really talked about you, the football fan. Are you?
Yeah.
And if so, do you still like it? Do you
Yeah.
think this job is going to ruin it?
Yeah. I mean, I can't go to games. No, it's a, when at the select committee, I was asked whether I supported a team, and I said I'm a lifelong Spurs supporter, much to my father's fury, because my father was a lifelong West Ham supporter. But my grandfather got to me before my father did. And, whenever I meet West Ham fans, I had the pleasure of sitting next to Sir Geoff Hurst at a game. And I was talking to him about West Ham in the 60s. And, because I was brought up on that, even though I was a Spurs fan. So, anyway, at the select committee, I was asked, and I said I was a Spurs fan. And, of course, Spurs the following week finally get into a European final that they win, for which I, had a ticket, and I couldn't go because if I'd gone, it'd have looked like I'd been on some corporate freebie. And, you would have quite rightly said, a week after being in front of the select committee, he's already taking corporate fees. I have not been to a single football match, apart from the Charity Shield, since then. Right? Because we're trying to figure out, and I certainly haven't been to Spurs, because we're trying to figure out...
do you need a disguise? There's got to be a way
well,
to
I
get
don't
you
know.
in, isn't there?
The truth is we're working out our corporate position on corporate hospitality.
Oh, I see.
And this has a very direct bearing on my life as a fan. But I suppose, I've seen a lot of football in my life, and, there is this thing called the television where one's allowed to watch it.
Indeed.
I am the sort of fan who instinctively, I'm a news guy. I come out of the news background more than I come out of a footballer. I'm a news guy who always reads. I read 5 newspapers and I read the news all the time. But the first thing I reach for every day when I'm reading a newspaper is I look for football results. I am that sort of fan, as we all are, and it gets into your bloodstream. And I can talk at tedious length about, Alan Mullery. I can talk about the Spurs teams of the 60s and 70s until you will drop dead with boredom.
Yeah, that's a different podcast.
But you know something, or you can't do a job in football without believing football is important and without believing that actually it's important for all the people who attend it, and ignoring all the stuff about the corporate stuff and the financial stuff and the rest of it. Ultimately, our job is to make sure that fans of 116 clubs have those clubs in the future. That's why the regulator exists. And I think that's a pretty worthwhile objective at my, late stage of life. This will be my last job. I'm 68 years of age, and I'm proud to do it.
A young man. Put that on the side of the building. That's a good place to end it. Thanks so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You.
For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.